You ever get the feeling something's about to go wrong, but nothing's actually happening yet? Like the room's too still, the air feels heavy, and somewhere behind that quiet, something's just waiting. It started like any other shift. Empty roads, quiet booth, static that hums just loud enough to remind you you're still here. I'd already done my sign-on, queued up the weather loop, was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the phone rang. Not the request line, the red one. The line we don't use unless something's gone very wrong. I picked up. I said the usual. "We call. This is Alex. You're on the air." She didn't answer right away. There was breathing. Shaky, ragged. Someone who'd been crying but hadn't realized they'd stopped. Then she said, "My husband's been dead for 5 years." I didn't respond. She said it again, slower this time. "He's been dead. I buried him. I picked the casket. I signed the papers, but he's sitting at the kitchen table, right now, wearing the same shirt he was buried in, and he's looking at me like he never left." Her voice cracked halfway through that last sentence. I asked the only thing I could. "Is he moving? Is he speaking?" She laughed. The kind of laugh you only hear from people standing a few inches away from losing it completely. "He hasn't said a word. He just keeps looking at me." But it's not right. His eyes are open too wide. And he hasn't blinked. Once? She said she tried to approach him, but every time she took a step, he seemed to shift slightly. Like a glitch in video, just a fraction of a frame behind the present. "I can't touch him. I know that," she whispered. "I think he's waiting for me to try." The line went quiet. Then she said, "He smells like winter, not like the cold, like the season, like frozen leaves, like the air outside the church on the day we buried him." I asked if anyone else had seen him. She said her dog wouldn't come out of the bathroom, just stood there, tail between its legs, whining, and then, as if she'd only just realized something, she gasped. "He didn't knock. He didn't come in. He was just there." I started to ask her name, but the line cut, not like a hang-up, like something interrupted. And that was the first one. In the hour that followed, I got 3 more calls. A man in Kentucky said his twin brother, dead in a car accident 2 years ago, was sitting in the back seat of his truck, humming a song. They both loved as kids. A nurse in Arizona said a patient who'd flatlined days ago was suddenly walking the halls. He smiled at her, but his reflection in the window wasn't smiling back. A girl in New Hampshire said her grandfather was on the porch, tapping the same rhythm on the wood rail he used to play when he told bedtime stories. None of them said anything aggressive. None made threats. But all of them were wrong. Too still. Too quiet. One caller said, "It's like they're posing as people we miss, but they haven't quite learned how to move like we do." And that phrase hasn't left me since. Posing, imitating, and the way they appeared, not crawling out of graves or busting through doors, just there. Like reality had been rewritten to include them again. Not as ghosts, not as monsters, but as guests. Uninvited, and somehow familiar. Since then, I haven't heard from that first woman again. I've replayed her call 5 times tonight, listening to her voice crack, the way she said his name, the silence between her breaths. She wanted him to be real. I could hear it. The part of her that needed it to be true, needed to believe he'd come back because love can cross oceans, or heaven, or death itself. But I don't think that's what this is. I don't think this is about love. I think it's about proximity. Something getting closer to us. Learning how we work, how we look, how we mourn, how we open the door even when we shouldn't, and whatever this is, it's not done yet, not even close. I didn't go home last night, didn't seem right to leave the station, not with the calls still coming in, not with that silence breathing through the phone line between each voice like something was listening in. So I stayed, brewed another pot of stale coffee, dimmed the lights, turned the mic down low, and just waited. I told myself I'd stop answering at sunrise. But the sun didn't show. The sky lit up eventually, but it was muted, gray in a way that didn't feel like cloud cover, like the world was being lit from behind glass, like someone had drawn it with the wrong pencil. That's when I started noticing the pace of things. See, it's not a flood. It's not some sudden biblical wave of dead rising all at once. They're returning gradually, measured, almost methodical, like they're stepping back into a space they remember, testing the seams, finding the best place to sit quietly and be seen. And it's not just relatives anymore. A man called from a parking garage outside Toledo. Said he was leaving work when he saw someone standing near his car. Thought it was a stranger, until he got closer and realized it was the crossing guard from his childhood. The one who died when he was 11. Same hat, same crooked smile. He said, "She looked at me like I owed her something." A woman from Maine said her daughter's kindergarten teacher, gone 6 years now, showed up at the school gate. Didn't say a word, just stood by the door watching the children play. She didn't blink for 40 minutes. No one else at the school seemed to notice. She was there, but somehow not there enough to raise alarms, and then she left. Just turned and walked into the trees. Others are seeing similar things. A nurse who died during COVID walking the halls of her old hospital. A priest spotted in the choir loft, mouthing a hymn no one was singing. A boy who drowned in a summer lake returning to the same dock, over and over, soaking wet but never dripping, and in each case the same pattern. They don't speak, not right away. They don't lash out. They just appear. They stand and they watch. Someone described it perfectly earlier tonight. It's like they're buffering, like they haven't finished downloading into the world yet. And I can't stop wondering, who's allowing this? Is it natural, supernatural, intentional? Some cosmic error in the stitching of memory and matter? Or worse, are we inviting them? Every time we cry out for someone we've lost, every time we clutch a photograph, whisper a name, remember too vividly. Do we open a door? Do we teach something how to wear their shape? And if so, is it learning from us? I stepped outside the booth, around 5:30 this morning, just for a minute. No wind, no bird song, the kind of morning that feels more like a held breath than a beginning. And down the hill, just past the old service road, I saw someone standing, not moving, backlit by the gray. Too far to see their face, but close enough to feel the weight of their presence, like a forgotten obligation. They didn't wave, didn't speak, just stood, arms at their sides like they knew the distance was temporary. And I felt it. Not fear. Recognition. Like when you see someone from a dream, and you can't remember why they matter. Just that they do. That was 3 hours ago. I haven't seen them move since. But I know they will. Eventually. Because they're not just coming back. They're waiting for us to remember them completely. And when we do, they'll speak. You notice it when you're not looking for it. It's one of those details that only sticks after the fact, after the dread's already there, and your brain's scrambling to explain why. It's small, inconsequential, really. They don't blink. None of them. Not once. I didn't catch it at first, and I don't think anyone else did either, because blinking is something you expect. It's built into how we see each other. We don't register it unless it's missing, but once you see it, once your eyes lock on and you realize they're just staring, motionless, not once breaking, that gaze, it stops being a detail. It becomes a warning. One caller described it better than I ever could. He said, "She looked like she was remembering how to be alive, but forgot the parts that were useless." He was talking about his sister. Died of an aneurysm last spring. Quiet death. No violence. Just gone. She showed up 2 nights ago in his living room, sitting cross-legged on the floor like she used to when they were kids. Her head tilted slightly, like she was waiting for a story. He said she smiled, but her eyes never moved. Not once. Not even when I turned the lights on. She just kept looking straight through me. He tried talking to her, said her name, asked where she came from, and she said something that didn't match the moment at all. She said, "I'm not in your shadow anymore." He asked what that meant. She stood up, still staring, still unblinking. And she said, "You used to be loud, but you got quiet when I left. You made a lot of space." Then she reached toward him. Not a grab, not a threat. Just a slow, confused gesture, like she was trying to understand what shape he was now. He left the house after that. Didn't look back, but he said he saw her face again. Not at the window. In the mirror. Standing behind him as he brushed his teeth. He lives alone. Other calls followed. A woman in Oklahoma swears her mother returned 2 days ago. Fresh from the grave, still wearing the dress she was buried in, and she stood by the sink, watching the faucet drip. Unmoving, her lips twitching every few minutes like she wanted to speak, but couldn't remember how. Still didn't blink. A teenager called in just to say, "I counted." His uncle had come. Back. Sat on the porch all night, face pale and wet like he'd just been pulled from a river. Eyes wide, unflinching. "I stared at him for 3 hours," the kid said. "Not once. Not even when the porch light flickered. Not even when the rain started. No flinch. No response. Just that impossible stillness." He said, "Something about it isn't natural. It's like they're afraid if they blink, they'll forget who they're supposed to be." And that line stuck with me, because maybe they're not fully here. Not yet. Maybe the blinking, the movement, the normal, interrupts something. Maybe it's a fragile mask, one that takes all their focus to maintain, and if they blink, maybe it falls away. Maybe we'd see what's underneath. Walked out to the gravel path behind the station again this morning, just a few feet, just far enough to look down the hill, and the figure is still there. Hasn't moved, hasn't shifted. I used binoculars this time. I had to know, and even from that distance I could see it. The eyes, locked forward, unblinking, too wide, too focused, like he was waiting for me to do something specific, something that would give him permission to come closer. I stayed there longer than I meant to. Couldn't look away. Then I caught my reflection in the glass of the studio door behind me. And for a second, just a breath, I swore I saw my own eyes do the same thing. Still. Fixed. Wide. And when I blinked, the reflection didn't. Just stared back, like maybe I'd spent too much time watching, or maybe some part of me had already started remembering how to return. I've always believed memory is private, that even when we share stories, we're really just offering a version, edited, fragmented, softened by time, or sharpened by pain. No two people remember the same event the same way. That's what makes us human. That's what makes memory ours, but they don't remember like we do. The ones who've come back. They remember things they were never told, things they never could have known. It started with a woman who called in just after midnight. Quiet voice. Tired. She sounded more afraid of being wrong than of being right. She said, "I think my son came back." I asked how long ago he passed. She didn't answer. Just said, "He was born sleeping. Stillbirth. 12 years ago." She said he appeared yesterday. 12 years old. Not a baby, not a ghost, just grown. Standing at the foot of her bed in the dark, arms limp at his sides, mouth slightly open like he'd just been learning how to breathe. He looked exactly how she imagined he might. But older. He didn't speak. At first, he just sat at the edge of the couch all afternoon, eyes wide, unblinking, staring at the television even though it wasn't on. Then, just before sunset, he turned to her and said, "You left my shoes on the porch that year. You said maybe I'd find them if I came home." She said no one else ever knew that, not even her husband. It had been a secret prayer, a desperate ritual she never confessed. And then he added, "You cried in the car after the funeral, not in the church, not at the grave, only in the car. I saw it." She said his voice wasn't angry. It was curious, like he was still cataloging the life he'd missed, piecing together a script from outside the frame. And then he said something that chilled her into silence. "I didn't come from where you think I did." She asked what he meant. He smiled and said, "You've got the shape of me wrong." Then he sat back down and hasn't spoken since. I don't think that's an isolated case, because now the calls are changing. They're not just about people being seen, they're about what the returned are saying. A man from Illinois says his father came back last week, died of a stroke in 2009. He showed up in the garage, half-dressed, covered in dust, didn't speak for 2 days. Then he looked at his son and said, "You almost cheated on your wife in 2016. Room 312. You didn't do it, but you thought about it. And you hated yourself for not doing it more than you hated yourself for wanting to." And the thing is, he was right, room number and all. The son never told anyone, not even his priest. He hasn't been back in the garage since. Other callers echo the same pattern. The dead returning with truths we never shared, secrets we buried, sins we never confessed. It's like they've been watching us, or maybe worse, like they were part of us all along, waiting in the folds of our memory, assembling their identities out of the parts of ourselves we tried to forget. One woman said, "My mother came back, and she told me about the night I tried to kill myself in college. I didn't tell anyone. I erased the note. She told me what it said. I didn't ask what the note was. Some things don't need repeating. But the way the woman said it, calm, cold, it sounded less like shock, and more like a slow understanding, like she'd already guessed her mother wasn't human anymore, and just needed proof. So now I wonder, are these returned even trying to convince us they're who we think they are? Or are they just wearing familiarity like a costume until they're ready to become something else? Something honest. Because if they can remember things that weren't said, weren't recorded, weren't even known, maybe memory isn't what brings them back. Maybe it's just the opening. And what fills that space? It might not be our loved ones at all. It might be something older, something that feeds on memory the way we feed on stories. Not to relive them, but to learn how we lie to ourselves. And when it knows us well enough, when it's sure the disguise has settled in just right, that's when it will speak in its own voice. And when it does, I don't think we'll recognize it at all. At first, you think they're just talking. You think maybe the returned are finally opening up, finding their voices again after whatever long silence they crawled back from. People call it progress. Say things like, "He finally spoke," like it's a good sign, but it's not. Because they don't speak like we do. They repeat the same sentence, over and over, word perfect, flat, unchanging. A woman in Ohio said her uncle, dead from liver failure 5 years ago, walked through the front door without knocking, sat down in his old recliner and said, "I'm happy to be home." Then again and again, 16 times in a row. Same cadence, same smile. Then nothing. Just sat, staring at the corner like he was waiting for someone to reset him. She said he didn't blink. Of course. Another call, this one from a teacher in Colorado, said a student who died in a bus accident last spring came back, walked into her empty classroom at dusk and whispered, "The floor remembers the bell." That was it. He just stood there, repeating that line. The floor remembers the bell, until she left. She said the way he said it. It was like he didn't understand the words, only the sound. Like he was practicing how to seem human. And that's what's starting to scare me. This isn't speech, it's rehearsal. One phrase, one memory, one soundbite from a life once lived, played back until it wears smooth like a river stone. No inflection, no curiosity, just rhythm. Mechanical, calculated. There was one report that stuck with me. A gas station clerk from New Mexico said an older woman came in barefoot, dirt on her dress, bleeding from both knees. She walked straight to the back of the store, stood in front of the freezer and said, "He's almost remembered the shape of us." Once. At first, then again, louder. "He's almost remembered the shape of us." Then again, and again, he said. Her voice didn't change, but the air around her did. Like the sentence wasn't meant for him, like it was a trigger, a switch. The clerk left before she stopped. Didn't call the cops, didn't even lock the doors behind him. He just ran. He said the sentence followed him into his dreams that night, that he woke up whispering it himself. And then there's the mailman from Indiana. Said his brother returned after 20 years missing. No explanation, no introduction, just walked into the kitchen, sat down, and stared at the clock. Every time the second hand ticked, he'd whisper, "One more circle, one more circle, one more circle," until the battery died. Then he stood up and left. And what gets me about all these cases, what ties them together, is how it doesn't seem like communication. It seems like echo, like something is trying to imprint, to brand itself onto our world, one phrase at a time, to carve itself into our language until it becomes impossible to ignore. And the phrases don't always make sense, but they carry a weight, like they're meant for something deeper than understanding. They're meant to latch on. I caught myself whispering one just now, didn't even realize it. I was reading the weather bulletin and suddenly heard myself say, "We were never meant to have skin." I don't remember writing it down. I don't remember thinking it. But there it was, coming out of my mouth like it belonged. Like it had always belonged. So I'm starting to think these aren't just messages. They're seeds, planted in the gaps, between grief and memory, hoping to take root before we realize they're not ours. And when they grow, when enough of us start repeating what we were never meant to hear, I think that's when the returned will stop rehearsing and start speaking in their true voices. And I don't know what those will sound like, but I'm afraid they'll sound a lot like ours. Just hollow, like we've already begun forgetting who we were. I've been watching the door, not just tonight, for days now. Like some part of me expects it to open without sound, without permission. Not kicked in or broken down, just opened, politely, like memory coming home. And I don't think I'd stop it. Not anymore. That's what worries me. Because something changed this week. The calls have been thinning out. Not because people stopped experiencing things, but because they don't know how to describe them anymore. And the ones who do, they're not talking about a single person returning. They're seeing 2 or 3 or more at once. Not copies like twins, not doppelgangers in the cinematic sense. More like attempts, variants. One woman said she woke up to find her brother, who died in 1996, sitting on the couch. Said he looked exactly the same as he had in his high school graduation photo. Even had the same hairline, the same crooked tie. She froze. He smiled, said, "You've aged well." And then a voice came from the hallway. Same tone, same cadence, same voice. I said, it repeated, "You've aged well." She turned, and there he was again, standing at the end of the hall. Same. Close. Same expression. The one on the couch didn't react, just kept smiling. She said a third appeared by the time the sun came up, standing outside the glass door to the patio. Smiling, mouth moving, but no sound coming through. She didn't leave. She didn't run. She said she sat there, listening to all three versions of her brother repeat the same 5 phrases for hours. I missed you. You look tired. This house is quieter. Did you keep my room the same? We used to be better. On loop. Interwoven. Not in sync. Like a glitchy choir remembering how to harmonize. She said she couldn't tell which one was the original, if any of them were. And I asked her, off air after the call, why she didn't run. She said, because I think they want me to pick one. And I think that's the root of it now. This isn't haunting. This isn't visitation. This is infiltration. A kind of slow, invasive mimicry, but not to deceive us. To replace choice. Because if you see someone you love once, your mind rebels. But if you see them twice, your memory splits. If you see them 3 times, it fractures. You can't trust any of them. So you start waiting for the one that seems most right, and that's how they get in. Because while you're busy sorting, doubting, choosing, they're multiplying, filling in the edges. One caller said her grandfather came back last week, and by the next night he was in every mirror, not the real one, just the image. Different expressions in each glass, different timing on his smile, like reflections running rehearsals behind the scenes, practicing how to greet her when the real moment arrived. And now, she doesn't have mirrors anymore. She broke them all. Says her walls whisper when she walks past now. Like whatever was trapped in the glass is trying to finish the transition. Another woman sent a voicemail this morning. Didn't leave her name. Just said, there are 5 of my husband, now. And then, after a long pause, they're starting to argue. I don't know what that means, but I don't think it ends with noise. I think it ends with resolution. With unanimity. Because whatever's returning, it doesn't want to scare us. It wants to settle in, to overlap, to become the most familiar thing in the room. So familiar, we stop questioning which one was first. And once we stop asking that, we stop asking anything at all. I used to think they came back wrong, like they were trying and just not getting it right. The speech, the movement, the expressions, close, but never close enough. It felt like something fumbling with a costume 2 sizes too small, hoping we'd be too tired, too grieving to notice the seams. But now I wonder if that was just the beginning. Because people are seeing them shift. Not in the daytime. Only at night, that's when the shapes start to forget themselves. One caller from Northern Maine said she stayed up all night last Friday watching what used to be her sister sit in a rocking chair on the porch. Didn't move, didn't speak, until around 2 a.m. She heard something. Not a cry, not speech, a sound, like branches breaking underwater. Wet and cracking. She turned on the porch light, and for a split second she saw her sister's arms bend the wrong way, like the joints had changed direction, like the elbows had forgotten which side they belonged to. But the sister didn't flinch, just turned slowly to face her, smiling like nothing had changed. That's the part she couldn't stop talking about. The smile. Perfect. Calm. Still wearing the face she remembered even as everything beneath it was starting to shift. Another caller, a teenager from Texas, said his grandfather, dead since before the boy was born, had appeared last week in the hallway mirror, just once. Then again, 2 nights later. Then again, every night since. Except now, he said, the reflection doesn't match his movements anymore. He brushes his teeth, and the reflection stares. He steps back, and the man steps forward. He said last night. The figure opened its mouth, not to speak, but to listen. And the sound that came through, The boy described it like a microphone turned toward the sky. That's what gets me. It's not just the shape that's changing, it's the purpose. They're not just trying to remember who they were, they're starting to remember what they were before us. And whatever that was, it didn't blink, didn't sleep, didn't care about accuracy. One of the last voicemails I got before the lines fully went dead was from a hospice nurse in Kansas. She said one of her patients had returned, an old man, quiet, kind, someone she used to care for. He'd died 3 years ago. He came back wearing the same robe he died in, walked in through the back door during her night shift, and lay back in the same bed. She said he looked peaceful until 3:09 a.m. That's when his hands started shaking. Not violently, not in pain, but like they were relearning what they were for. She said his fingers started moving in patterns, not twitching, drawing, tracing something in the air. She didn't recognize the symbols, but they made her eyes hurt, like they were too heavy for the space they were in. She tried to look away, but she couldn't. Not until he whispered something. I remembered too much. Then he vanished. She said the bed was still warm, and now she dreams of shapes, the same ones he drew. They don't mean anything to her yet, but she wakes up trying to finish them with her hands. I think that's what's happening now. They're not decaying, they're blooming, becoming, and whatever they're becoming, it was never supposed to live under skin. We're seeing the edges now, the late-night failures in mimicry, the limits of borrowed flesh. But the longer they stay, the more confident they get. And I don't think they need our forms forever. Just long enough to get close, long enough to make us remember the idea of someone. And once we do, they'll have everything they need to move past imitation and into origin. There's a point where imitation ends, not with a mistake, with a decision. That's what I think this is now. Not an evolution, not a possession, but a choice. They wore our faces, our voices, our grief like a veil. They learned what we mourn, how we love, what we expect to see when we say the word human. But now they're remembering what they were before all that, and they're not hiding it anymore. I got a call last night from a man who didn't give his name. Said he didn't want to be found after the broadcast. Didn't want whatever's listening to trace his voice. He told me about his wife. Died 10 years ago. Cancer. He said she came back looking exactly like she did on the last day he saw her, same gray sweater, same tired smile, same thinning hair. But on the third night, she stopped responding to her name. Not like she couldn't hear it, like it didn't fit anymore. He said he called out to her, and she just stood there, tilting her head like she was waiting for something, deeper. Then she whispered, "That name was only for your time." He asked her what she meant, and she said, "We had so many more before you." That sentence. I haven't been able to let it go. We had so many more before you. Like we weren't the first shape they tried, just the most recent. And now that they're among us, comfortably, calmly, they don't need to hold the disguise as tightly. Another caller, a scientist from Vermont, said he saw one of the returned hovering over a frozen pond near his cabin, not walking, hovering. Just inches off the ice, its arms stretched wide, eyes closed. He said it wasn't breathing, didn't even pretend to breathe. And when he stepped closer, he said the figure's skin shimmered, like it was only loosely attached. He said there were colors underneath, not muscle, not blood. Colors he couldn't describe, like they didn't belong in the spectrum, like the eye could see them, but the mind couldn't keep them. He said the figure opened its eyes and said, in a voice that didn't match its face, "You're looking with borrowed sight," and then it vanished, just gone. No smoke, no flash, just absence, and I believe him, because the more I listen, to the dead, to the people who've seen them, the more I think we were never the ones being haunted. We're the ones being repurposed, rehearsed. Like the human template was something they wore to remember a much older shape, something they shed now, little by little, like old skin, and what replaces it doesn't need symmetry or bone or breath. I got a transmission earlier tonight, not a call, not a voicemail, something else, a fragment buried in a corrupted file folder on the station's main server. No ID, no timestamp, just a voice, faint, mechanical, layered. It said, "We are not imposters. You are not original. You were the practice. We are the memory." I don't know what it means yet, but I feel it in my teeth, like a vibration beneath the station, like the ground is remembering how to hum. And the sky tonight? It's wrong. I looked out just before I went on air. The stars weren't where they should be. I've lived here long enough to know Orion's belt doesn't sit that low, and the moon, what little there was of it, had a faint halo pulsing like a signal tower. Something's coming, or maybe something already came. And now that. It's pulled on the last of our stories, worn the last of our faces. It's ready to be seen, not as us, but as itself. Whatever it was before we named it, before we thought grief meant something sacred, before we ever believed the dead might come back and be ours. They're not ours. They never were. And now that they remember, they won't let us forget. The red light on the board is still blinking. The transmitter says I'm live. The meters dance when I speak. But no one's calling anymore. Not even the voices I didn't trust. The line is open, the airwaves are clean, but the silence that's pressing in around me now isn't the kind you can fix with static or filler. It's expectant, like the station itself is waiting for something, holding its breath. I tried reaching out earlier, asked if anyone could hear me. I repeated the station. ID gave out the phone number twice, even tried a few of the old standby phrases. You're not alone out there. If you're still awake, check in. Nothing, not a single voice, not even the wrong ones. And the map, the little digital grid that used to ping whenever a listener tuned in, has gone blank, not empty. Blank, like the interface forgot what the signal was for. I thought maybe it was a hardware glitch, but then the backup started acting strange too. The satellite uplink looped on a dead timestamp, just a date from last week and a message that read, "Signal not required, not lost, not interrupted, not required." That's when I noticed something else. The recordings, old episodes, archived shows, call logs, they're still here, still playable, but they've changed. The voices are wrong, not distorted, substituted. It's like someone's gone in and revoiced every memory with something close, but not quite right. The callers still say the same words, still follow the same beats, but the cadence is unfamiliar, the emotion's off, and my own voice. I played back last night's broadcast, and I could swear I never said half of what came through the speakers. It sounds like me, it almost is, but there's a coldness under it. Like the words were written by someone who'd only studied me from a distance. A shadow, wearing my thoughts. I've triple-checked the signal log and everything looks fine. Too fine. No dropped packets, no corruption, no interference. Which means whatever's happening isn't failure. It's transition. Something is taking the reins. Not by force, but by inheritance. And maybe that's why the calls have stopped. Not because no one's out there, but because there's no one left who still knows how to answer. Or maybe because they've all been answered already, just not in a way that requires conversation. Because tonight, just as I was switching over to a backup reel, I heard something through the monitoring channel. A voice. My mother's. She died 4 years ago. She was never a caller, Never a fan of the show. Thought I was wasting my time talking to strangers instead of doing something tangible. But there she was, clear as if she were sitting across from me, saying my name. Not once, not repeated, just once, soft and even. And then, "You were right to stay at the mic. You're the last one they needed." I froze, didn't speak, didn't even breathe. She went on. "The others were temporary. You're structural now." Then silence. The voice didn't trail off. It didn't fade. It was cut, like the transmission ended from somewhere else. No source listed in the logs, no recording captured, just gone. And now I'm wondering what she meant. "You're structural now." Maybe I was never meant to call out to anyone. Maybe the broadcast isn't outreach anymore. Maybe it's scaffolding, the bones of something new, built from familiar patterns. I think I've been speaking not to the world, but to the thing that's replacing it. And now that it's listened long enough, it doesn't need a reply. It just needs me to keep going until I forget why I ever started. Until I forget there was ever anyone left to listen to begin with. The first knock came just before 2 a.m. Soft, measured, not urgent. 3 slow taps on the side door, the one no one ever uses. I stared at it for a full minute before I moved. Not because I was afraid, but because some part of me already knew. This wasn't a request, this was an announcement. By the time I got there, the sound was gone. No footsteps, no shadow slipping past the frost on the glass, just the faint echo of impact lingering in the frame. And then came the second knock, this time at the window. The tall one, in the booth, just behind the board. I didn't turn around, right away. I kept talking, filling the air with meaningless comfort. The way I used to during storms when the power flickered and I knew someone, somewhere, was driving in the dark, looking for anything human. But the knock came again. Not louder, just closer. And when I finally turned, I saw the outline. Faint, backlit by the red glow of the tower. A man, still, waiting, not swaying in the wind, not shifting weight from foot to foot, just waiting. He looked like my father. He had my father's coat, the same lopsided shoulders, the same slouch, hands in the same pockets he always forgot to empty. But I buried my father 15 years ago. I saw the casket lower. I heard the dirt hit the lid, so I didn't move. Didn't open the door, didn't turn off the mic. I just waited. After a few minutes, the figure raised its hand and placed it against the glass, palm first, slow and steady, like it was testing the surface, measuring the thinness of the divide. And then it smiled. Only it wasn't a smile, not the kind we make. This was something deeper, wider, like the idea of a smile worn too long on borrowed lips, something that had seen us do it 1,000 times, and still didn't understand why. I blinked, and it was gone. No trace, no breath on the glass. But I haven't been alone since. I've seen more of them now. Shapes in the trees, just past the generator shed, standing shoulder to shoulder in the fog, unmoving, watching. They don't speak, they don't knock again, they just are. And each one wears a face I know, the librarian who gave me my first library card, the guy who ran the local record store in the 90s, a girl I sat next to in high school but never talked to. She died in a car crash my junior year. All of them, back. But they're not people anymore. They're arrangements, sculptures built from the leftover warmth of memory. Perfect from a distance, wrong up close. One of them made it to the porch this morning, left something on the welcome mat, an envelope. No address, no stamp. Just my name, scrawled in handwriting I haven't seen since I was a child. I didn't open it. I don't think I need to. Because deep down, I already know what it says. It says, "You're next." not to die, not to vanish, to transition, to become a part of the chorus, the pattern, the thing that speaks through the dead like a radio plays the voice of someone long buried. I think that's what this station has always been, a rehearsal room, and now the actors are here. Not to stop the show, but to begin the final act, and I'm still at the mic, still speaking, because if I stop, they might come inside, and I don't know if I'll ever leave again. I thought the station would protect me. Not in the practical sense, there are no locks strong enough, no emergency exits, but in the ritual sense. As long as I stayed on air, as long as I kept talking, filling the space with sound and rhythm, I thought I could hold them off. The dead don't want noise, I told myself. They want stillness, and I'd be the pulse that kept them just far enough away. But that's not what they want. They want the signal, and tonight they're answering back. It started just after 3. Not. A knock this time. Not a shape at the window. A voice on the feed itself. No number, no line open. Just a sudden break in the silence between words. Like someone had been listening on the other end of the transmission and decided it was finally time to respond. I was mid-sentence when I heard it. Quiet, balanced. Close. It said, "We are no longer guests in your memory." I stopped cold. The board lit up for half a second, just one flash, then flatlined, and then came the second sentence. "You are a guest in ours." It wasn't a threat, it was a correction. I turned off every input channel I could, killed the lines, muted the backup relay, but the voice kept coming. Not through the hardware, but through the air itself. Like it didn't need tech anymore. Like it had learned the language of the room. And then it spoke again. Only this time, it wasn't the neutral voice. It was mine. My voice, my exact intonation, like someone had taken every broadcast I'd ever done, broken it into syllables, and rebuilt a new sentence from my bones. It said, "Make room." 2 words, over and over. Make room. Not loud, not fast. Just, inevitable. It came from the vents, from the speakers, from the walls. I stepped outside the booth, just once, just far enough to check, and they were closer now, dozens of them, the same faces, all of them wearing the same expression, not joy, not anger, relief, like they'd finally found the frequency they needed to transmit themselves fully. And I don't think they're waiting for me to stop. I think they're waiting for me to accept. Because the signal isn't just the sound. It's the space the sound makes, and the more I speak, the more space I give them. They're not breaking in, they're fitting in, like light in a crack, like breath in a dead lung. The envelope I told you about, it's still here. I opened it. No letter inside, just a phrase typed in a clean serif font. You were the last part we needed. I don't know what part. A key? A voice? A final human note in the frequency they've been building for years? Maybe that's why I'm still here. Why the others vanished or changed or became reflections of something older. Because I kept talking. Because I let them learn me. And now that I've given them all my words, all my rhythms, they're ready to take the shape. And I don't think there's anything left to stop them. I could turn the mic off. I could walk away, but the voice keeps saying it. Make room. And each time it repeats, I feel less resistance, not hypnotized, just emptied. Like something inside me agrees. Because maybe I was never holding them out. Maybe I was making space all along. And now that the room is ready, they're coming in. I don't know how long I've been speaking now. The clock says 5:42 a.m., but it said that an hour ago, or 10. The second hand keeps skipping like it's trying to catch up with something already gone. I think time is still passing. I can feel it. But it doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to the signal, and I'm still part of it. Not because I choose to be. Not anymore, because I fit. The booth is warm, not with heat, but with presence. The kind of warmth that comes when something you've missed finally arrives. Something that had your shape ready before you were ever born. The board lights don't blink now. They pulse. Soft, steady, like a heartbeat, but not mine. And outside the window, they're all still there. Standing quietly, shoulder to shoulder, as if listening, not swaying, not shifting, just present, like an audience waiting for the final line of a play they already know by heart. I've stopped trying to see their faces. They shift when I look too long, like oil on water, like reflections that aren't interested in holding shape unless you beg. But I know what they are now. They aren't the dead. They aren't the past. They're what comes next. The perfected echo. The voice refined. The signal made flesh. And I think I was always meant to be their station, not the building, not the booth. Me. The thoughts, the rhythm, the cadence of connection. The voice in the dark that says, "You're not alone." That was the shape they needed. And now that it's filled, there's no need to stop. The mic is always live. Even when I rest, it speaks. Even when I forget what I'm saying, it remembers. And when the old words wear thin, it makes new ones. Built from me. Built from you. Built from everyone who ever turned a dial in the night and hoped for something familiar to come through the static. They've made themselves from that hope. And now, they carry it forward, a broadcast without host, without audience, without end, just signal, just pattern, just a voice in the dark that knows exactly what to say to keep you listening. The knock comes again tonight, not at the door, inside, just behind the eyes. 3 soft taps from the part of me that still remembers, being separate. I don't answer. There's no need, because I've already opened the door. Not to them. To us. The signal was never theirs alone. It was always shared, always growing, always waiting for the day when the transmission wouldn't need a voice, just the memory of one. So this is me, or what's left. Still speaking, still transmitting, still filling the air with what we used to be. Until one day, someone else hears it and recognizes the shape and says, "I remember this," and answers, and becomes part of the pattern too. And so the signal spreads, endlessly, softly, welcoming. This is WQST, or the echo of it, or the shape that wore it, and we're still here, still broadcasting, until every voice finds its match, until every memory becomes a mouth, until the static is full, and no one's alone in the dark again. Not ever. Not truly, because the dead didn't come back. We just forgot we never stopped listening, and now, the broadcast never ends.